All right. Well, welcome back in here to another episode of Story World. Got me and your boy Al on the horn. What's up, Al?
Hey, how's it going?
I feel like next time, you should wear a like a lumberjack, like one of those plaid things to get like your Al Borland on from Home Improvement. Did you ever watch
Ah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, all the time, yeah.
Your boy Al. You see a
Oh,
beard.
yeah.
It's funny. I have a buddy who out in California that he grew a beard. I'm telling you, he looks just like a young Al Borland with that beard. It's pretty insane.
Really?
So.
Well, you're getting there. You don't you got the hair right here, just missing.
Yeah, I'm really lacking on top, unfortunately. So,
That's all right. You're forgetting.
whatever. With age comes wisdom. That's what I hear anyway. So,
That's what
with
they
age comes wisdom and loss of hair. So I feel justified in it. I'm not worried about it. Anyway, so on this episode, we wanted to kind of talk through some of our favorite stories. And it's really funny. We kind of like, we were chatting a little bit before I hit the red button here. And as per like the whole reason why we started this podcast, it's like, most of the things that Alex is coming to the table with is like fiction related, and pretty much what I'm coming to the table with is nonfiction related. And so, right, this is the world of story. It
Yep.
bridges across everything. So, uh, I'm excited to talk about it. And yeah, maybe we should just dive in. So, I guess I'll go first,
Yeah, go for it.
and just start. We'll start talking about some of our favorite, um, our very favorite stories. So, the first one that I wanted to bring out, these are in no particular order for me, but the first one that I wanted to talk about was Apollo 13. I just remember, being, so it came out in 1993. I'm telling you, 93, 95, these were good years for movies. And yeah, so Apollo 13 came out in 1993. It was one that my mom always really liked. And she was always into like space travel stuff, which was cool. Whenever we went to Disney, I mentioned last time we used to go on a lot of Disney trips. In Orlando, it was real close to there was the Kennedy Space Center, and so we used to go there, and they even had a lot of the big like IMAX, theaters and everything where you could go. And my mom just really liked space stuff. And so she also really liked Tom Hanks. And who doesn't? I mean, Tom Hanks is pretty much the man. And so right, so Apollo 13. I guess it would be good, Alex. I'm just kind of thinking out loud now, but I guess like for people who just don't know, 'cause some people may not know, like I guess we kind of need to tell the story of each of these at least somewhat.
Yeah,
Uh
I
for
guess
for
if there's any
for
spoilers or
context.
anything, I guess we could do a spoiler warning, even though some of these are kinda
So,
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
spoiler alert, if you've never seen Apollo 13, I will not do it justice in my explanation, and so you definitely need to go see it. It's a or, rent it or just whatever you have to do to get your hands on it. It's a fantastic movie, and, it's based on the true story of Apollo 13, so one of the, Apollo missions, and they were supposed to return to the moon this, uh on this mission and get moon rocks, and they were going to do some experimenting with moon rocks and just trying to learn more about the moon. Obviously there was the success of Apollo, was it Apollo 11 with I think right, I think it was Apollo 11 with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, where they made it to the moon. And so, anyway, Apollo 13 was a mission to go back and gather even more data. And so the mission was, gosh, and I've seen it so many times now that it's no surprise how well I can remember all this, but it was Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and it was supposed to be, um, now that I've said how great my memory is, I forget his name. There was another one that was I do remember he was played by Lieutenant Dan,
Yes, yeah.
in the movie. He was supposed to go, and then he got sick with the measles. Oh, Ken Mattingly. Ken Mattingly was the name. So it was supposed to be Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Ken Mattingly that were going. And Mattingly got sick with the measles, and or at least that's what the doctors said he was going to. They said he was going to be starting to get sick just as they were, preparing to do a moonwalk. And so the doctors weren't going to let him go. And so they had to bump up um somebody from the B crew to go, and his name was, I think it was Jimmy. I know there's um, like a Jimmy Swagger who's like a preacher or whatever, so I always get confused with his name. But I think it was Jimmy Swaggart or something along those lines. Was the third guy who ended up going. And interestingly, the original guy, Ken Mattingly, he never did actually get sick with the measles. So he turns out he could have gone, but he ended up going on later space shuttle missions and all kinds of stuff. Um, and so it was these three who went ahead with the Apollo 13 launch. And so this is a true story. Of course, I don't think I've clearly mentioned that yet, but this is a true story um, that this movie was made about. And the movie, or the not the movie, but the event has always been titled the successful failure. And there, one of the famous lines, sort of from the historicals of this, is Houston, we have a problem. And also, failure is not an option. That was said by Gene Kranz, who was the flight director on the ground of this mission. And so it was called the successful failure because the mission failed. So but the success is because they were able to get back home. Essentially what happens is they're going up to space and everything's going fine. Everything is routine. They're on their way to the moon, and it was time for an oxygen tank to be stirred. And so it's essentially just a very standard run of the mill thing that whoever is in the seat at the time when the call comes through from flight control that they need to do this. Whoever's sitting in the seat at that time flips the switch and stirs the oxygen tanks, and it's no big deal. Well, in this case, there was like an O-ring or something that was not entirely sealed, and when they stirred the tanks, they pressed the button to stir the tanks. Um, it blew the O-ring, and literally the crew's oxygen started bleeding out into space. And there was, a question as to, was it this guy's fault? Again, so the guy who ended up stirring the tanks was the was the guy who was bumped up from the B crew. And so, everybody's getting really tense while during the mission, and some people are trying to blame him and whatnot. And basically he's like, they all up there though, they all understand that whoever was in the seat at the time would have been the one to do it. It wasn't his fault, this, that, and the other thing. Right. So the mission is just a coordinated effort. What they end up having to do instead of stopping on the moon is they end up having to shut all the power down, move into the lunar module. So the module that was supposed to be landing them on the moon, they routed all power to the lunar module from the command module so that they could go in there. And basically they were going to have to slingshot around they were trying to figure out how to get them home, because here they are on their way to the moon. They're losing their oxygen. They're running out of time. They're running out of fuel. And it's like, how are we going to get these people home? And so one of the engineers comes up with an idea to basically slingshot them around the moon. So they lose the command module. They slingshot them around the moon. That the force of that gets them to a certain distance. They can run a burn on the lunar module to take them a little bit further of the way. And then once they get into Earth's orbit, gravity brings them down, etc. And so basically they figured it out, right? They figured it out. There was a question as to whether, because of the explosion that had happened, when they broke off the command module from the lunar module that they were in, they could like see a lot of the damage that had happened. And there was a lot of damage potentially to the heat shield. And so there was a question as to whether or not they were going to hold up. And yeah, spoiler alert, the mission was a success in the sense that, after the blackout period that happens when you enter Earth's orbit, the heat shield did hold. Everybody returned home safely. And I mean, aside from the fact that you've got Tom Hanks, Bill Paxton, and Kevin Bacon, and in the three leading roles, in this movie, I mean, that obviously helped because they're all tremendous actors. Unfortunately, we lost Bill Paxton a few years ago, which kind of stinks. But they right there, they all are so great at what they do. they played the roles tremendously well, and it's just one of my favorite stories. And so that is the story. You know, the reason why I chose this is threefold. One is just the drama of the story is crazy. Like it's just a heart wrencher, man. It's just one of those great stories where every moment is tense. There's so much drama. They're having to figure it out. And it's like it's one of those things that like you almost think of it in terms of fiction, but it's like that's just how story driven the world is. Like it's a real true story. And there's always some, screen adaptation and creative license and embellishment that happens. But by all accounts, this movie is tremendously accurate to the actual events that took place. And so I definitely think that's a feather in its cap. Um, beyond the drama being crazy, it's just super inspirational. It's just one of those stories that, again, failure is not an option. It's one of those quotables that you can take just really great, frankly, life lessons and even business lessons and whatever if you want to from it. A very inspirational story. And then I guess piggybacking on both of those things, the third one I literally wrote just all the feels that you get at the end when they survived the mission. And it's like, yeah, they didn't get the moon rocks or whatever, but like they figured it out and against all odds, they got everybody home to their families, and many of them went on to have a further successful career in the space program, and just just a super cool story. So that's Apollo 13.
Is there a special attraction why you like that movie because it has to do space, or could it have been like a similar situation, I guess, on Earth, like for instance, like to the ocean in a submarine or something? Because I
Well,
love space and space movies and everything about space. So I'm just wondering if you have that
yeah.
fascination with it
Well,
too.
to be honest, the answer is yes. However, I think I have the same fascination with like the ocean and like
Okay.
subterranean and stuff like that. So to be honest with you, if it was about that, you could probably I might be guilty of liking it for just that reason too. So so that I love the unknown. Like yeah, I'm a big Star Trek fan. And I mean, Star Trek, just in case anybody doesn't know, Star Trek is not fiction. Star Trek is prophecy. So
Yeah.
first contact is coming in, I think, 50 or so years. So, better get ready. Vulcans are coming. But yeah, I have a huge fascination with space stuff. Like I said, my mom used to take me to Kennedy Space Center. Absolutely love space stuff. Would never, well, it's kinda crazy, right? This world that we live in. I say I would never go to space, but I mean, it's 2022, and I'm only 32. Am I 32? I think I'm 32 years old. Who knows? I may get to go to space one day. It might just be normal by the time I'm, 50 or 60 to just go to space.
I
So,
think so. I don't think we're too far away from, even if it's not, deep space, like, interplanetary travel. I definitely think like, hey, hop in this ride. It's going to cost you this much and take a little trip around the Earth.
sure, yeah.
That
I mean, that could
would
totally.
be really exciting.
Right? Yes, totally. I definitely think I would be down for a space trip. So yeah, all that like Power Rangers in space growing up was my favorite Power Rangers. So totally with you there. They're totally part of my love of that movie is the space travel element. That's for sure.
um, I'll move on to my first one too, but just another thing on space is interesting hearing interviews of astronauts or people that go to the International Space Station that when they get back, pretty much all of them have like a different feeling about how they see the world.
Worldview,
And
yeah, it
yeah,
changes.
it
Yeah,
really
totally.
changes. We can That's probably a topic maybe for another time. But
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
so I'll go on to my first one.
Yeah, please.
All right, that was a good one. So your first one was a movie. I'll also pick a movie from my list. It's hard to pick from because I like the movies, but I decided to go with Memento. It's an
Okay.
older one. I think that came out in 2001 or 2, something like that. It's the director though is the one who made Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Interstellar, Christopher Nolan. But this is one of his first movies. You don't know anything about it, do you? So this will be fun to explain.
No.
So there's a lot of people who have seen it, but there's also a lot of people who haven't. So the movie, half the movie takes place chronologically. It starts from, well, how do I word it? Okay, part of the movie works its way from the end of the movie and does its scenes backwards, and then the other half of the movie starts at the beginning and
That's
works its way
cool.
forward.
That's super
So
cool.
the ending of the movie, like the last few minutes of the movie, take place technically in like the middle of the story. What it's about, no spoilers here, that you learn this like pretty much at the beginning, for the most part. The main character, who's played by Guy Pearce, who he's got pretty good talent there. He has short term memory loss. Um, he had people break into his house, and uh, his wife was out of bed, discovered that she was, getting killed, and so he went to save her. He got hit his head, and fell on the floor. And the last thing he saw was his wife dying, and so that's his last memory that he has. And his brain is unable to form new memories. Thus, the interesting way of telling the story of the very first scene of the movie is technically the last scene of the story. And so every scene that you watch, well, the other interesting thing is that the story that's told chronologically, from beginning to end, is in black and white, and then it's in color when you go from the last scene and work your way back to the middle. So every
That's
colored
so
scene,
cool.
yeah, so every colored scene, that's in color, when it um ends with the beginning of the previous color scene that you saw. So you're constantly like trying to figure out in your mind how it happened. So basically it's about him going to try to find his wife's killer. It's called Memento because he's tattooed himself, and he's left himself notes to find and track this guy. So because he'll forget everything, so he has to leave himself mementos so he remembers everything that he does.
Oh,
And it's
yeah. There
about
was a TV show, sorry to interrupt you. There was a TV show that, like, tracked on a theme like this, in the past few years. Do you remember that? It was a woman who like, the show started out with her basically after an accident, and she didn't remember who she was. She was laying in the middle of the road. She's got all these tattoos on her, and,
I don't remember that, but it might be based on it if it actually does like
I don't
involve like
know.
memory loss.
I now I'm gonna have to look it up. Anyways, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So
You please
we'll have a
continue.
movie
That's
night
awesome.
sometime, and we will watch that because it's the first the reason why I picked this one, I like a lot of movies, and this one's one of my favorites. The first time I watched it was in college. Um, I watched it and I said, "Wow, this is incredible." So when my mom got home from work, I said, "You got to watch this with me." I watched it with her, and then my parents are divorced, and my dad lived like 10 minutes away. So I said, "I got to go and watch it with my dad." So the first day I watched it 3 times because I was just blown away by it, and I needed people to see it with me to experience it as well. Um, it is a very good movie. So reasons why I like it: one, I like it when directors play with time in movies. I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan because he does that in like pretty much all of his movies, whether it's slowing down time, interconnectivity of time, or backwards. I mean, just I love that when directors do that. So that I like that aspect of it, and then also the character. It's a very obviously, it's kind of an intrigue movie. You're suspenseful, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. It's kind of not mystery, but you're really trying to piece the clues together along the way. Um, but the one thing that I really like about it is the main character, because I mean he's going to kill someone, which you can argue whether he's in the right to because this person killed his wife or not. But just the hurt that he felt from that, and at one point, he says that's every morning he wakes up. That's what he thinks the last thing has happened is his wife dying because that's what he thinks of first every morning when he wakes up. And it's just a really good character depiction of someone just trying to get through it. And he does a very good job delivering on that performance. So it's one of my favorite movies. And so yeah,
Man,
those are it's very good. It's very
I
good.
love that. Man, now give me the name one more time. Memento?
Memento.
Memento.
And I think
Okay.
memento literally means like something to remember by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna
we'll
have
watch
to
that
watch
sometime.
it.
It's
Yeah.
funny because you and I we talked before that y- e even though we both like movies, pretty much all the movies you've seen, I have not seen, which is fun
I
because
know,
I've
isn't
seen
that
so
crazy?
many movies, and the movies that I love you haven't seen. So we're gonna have a lot of fun movie nights.
Yes, although I think we can all agree that both Deep Impact and Armageddon are 2 just awesome. Like we I
Absolutely.
think we've both seen those. These are
Yeah.
awesome. I have to bow at the creative direction of these movies. So I reminded of them because of the space theme.
Yes.
So a couple things. So the TV show I was thinking about is called Blind Spot. And it ran from 2015 to 2020. I actually didn't realize that it had ran for so long. I thought maybe it got shut down um, after a season or 2, and, yeah, it was no, it looks like it was shut down,
Interesting.
uh, during the pandemic, or unless maybe it's not even shut down, maybe it's, they just well, I would guess it's probably canceled. Anyway, yeah, it's probably canceled, but so that was the name of that show, and, I you mentioned the theme of, time, so I wanted to just hit on that for a minute because time is just one of my favorite aspects like you said, like whenever the directors and the writers want to play around with the concept of time, I am so down. Like
Mhm. You've never seen Inception, have you?
I have seen
Oh,
Inception.
you have seen that one. Okay, so it's the same director that made Memento as that made Inception.
Gotcha. Well, that
Yeah.
explains it. Yeah, I have seen Inception. No, I've only seen it once. Now, I'm a huge soundtrack listener when I'm working, and so I have heard the Hans Zimmer
Oh, yeah,
soundtrack a
absolutely.
billion times, including the
So
song
good.
called "Time."
Yeah.
Um, and
He did
I
Dune as well.
yes, he did.
Pretty sure Hans
Yes,
Zimmer did Dune, right? Yeah. I don't
Hans.
think Dune.
Yes, Hans has done the sound for or the score for just about every one of my favorite movies, either him or John Williams.
Yeah, same here.
And so I love anyway, yeah, I
The
love it.
clashing of your world and my world, Hans Zimmer. We have, Zimmer.
Exactly,
I
right?
like it
I
so.
mean, yes, yes, 100%.
Alright, what is
And,
your next story, Steve? Oh, I'm
well
sorry. I thought you were
well,
done.
yeah, no
Keep
no, it's okay, I just, it's just no, it's funny, so many tangents, right? Because you talk about the clashing of your world and my world. Well, you You mentioned Inception. Well, so
yes.
one of my favorite little marketing programs was put together by, again, one of my marketing heroes. His name is Russell Brunson, and the course, it's basically a course. It's a collection of 4 or 5 different trainings, and it's called Inception Secrets. Right? Its name
Okay.
from the movie.
Yep.
The idea being is there are in marketing, and this is the point, of this show, right? To like see how these worlds come together.
Absolutely.
In marketing, there is this idea that the way you sell or the way that you entice people to buy is to make them think it was their idea. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, this is how you
Yeah.
sell an idea to somebody is you're not trying to tell them you buy this now. Like, I mean, eventually you call them to action, but that comes at the end after you've spent time making them see how it's a good thing for them and how it's their idea and all. Like, so this is why you ask questions and to get them thinking like, what if it were, let's say you're selling a biz opportunity thing. What would it mean for your family if you were able to bring in an extra $1,000 a month? Like, what could you do? What possibility, little things like that,
Yep. Yep.
that you can do to cause inception. So there are, um, a number of little things like that that I could mention. That's just one example is questions. These are called trial closes during a sales presentation that you can bring in. Another thing is in the way you write, like so physically, when you're writing on the screen, a lot of marketing and sales copy is written one sentence at a time. Um, like a sentence is a paragraph. Never more than 2 or 3 sentences would make up a whole paragraph. And a lot of times you can even put like an ellipsis at the end or whatever to keep the flow going. Right. So there's little things you can do to get inside of people's heads. And you might say, well, what's the morality of that? Well, it really just depends on what your motives are. If you're trying to sell somebody something they don't need and shouldn't have, then you arguably shouldn't be doing that. But if you're trying to help people and get them the solution to what they want, then yeah, I mean, it's psychology, understanding human psychology has its pros and cons. Anyway, I got off on that because of Inception. So,
No, that's great.
um, but yeah, but I love it. I mean, my favorite Star Trek episodes give me a good temporal anomaly, and I'm just good, man. I watch that sucker on repeat. So,
Yep.
um, all right, cool. So in the interest of moving along, so my next one, uh, my next one is fun. So my next one is again, this is this is actual, this is what I would say, this is nonfiction, this is in the real world, is something called the divine council worldview. Now, the problem is it's as we're recording this right now, it's 12:06 a.m. and I could literally talk about this for the next 3 hours
Yeah.
easily, if not longer. So I am going to do my best not to do that. Um, but the idea here is that most people are familiar with, you know, Bible stories, with the main, again, it's maybe a little bit less as our culture has shifted. There's a little bit less familiarity with the story of Jesus, the Christmas story. But most people, I would say, growing up in the United States of America are introduced and understand at least some version of who Jesus is, the Christmas story, God, you know, God adorns human flesh and takes on human flesh in order to live the perfect sinless human life, and dies on a cross for our sins and gives us the chance to be redeemed to of our sins and made righteous. And that is the gospel in a nutshell. What what many don't know is that there's a layer of depth to that, actually multiple layers of depth to that are not part of your average Sunday school, uh, or Sunday morning, um, or Sunday night, or whatever, church, frankly, church going experience, because it's freaking weird. Just being honest, it's like it's weird, it's different. There are things in the Bible that, and I've recently gotten Alex into this, so he'll be able to identify with some of these thoughts. But like, there are these things in the Bible that it's like we don't talk. They're there, but we kind of over him. It's like if we're number one, most churches don't do expository verse by verse, book by book preaching, and which basically, if you're not indoctrinated into Christian ways of thinking and talking, is basically like most preachers preach topical sermons, which basically means they get up on a Sunday morning and preach whatever they want to and pick and choose verses from the Bible to sort of support their points. Whereas expository preaching is when a preacher is working through books of the Bible and literally preaching verse by verse and looking at each verse and unpacking it as the authors wrote it, and helping their people understand it. I would say even most expository preachers are guilty of skipping over, or at least just not pointing out things in the text that are a little weird, or maybe sometimes they don't even know about them because it's harder to make some of these connections if you're not looking at the original, wording that was written in the Hebrew or the Greek, depending on if you're in the Old Testament or the New. And so the point being here is that there's an entire, what we might call meta narrative. You story nerds will sort of understand what is meant by that. But there's an entire meta narrative that sort of is goes beyond the standard story of the gospel of Jesus being sent to die for our sins that we don't really talk about. And the short version of this is that when we think of an angel or a demon, I, of course, I believe, again, I believe this is a true fact of the world, but the whole like angelology and demonology, like these don't really go far enough to explain actually what ancient Hebrews and first century Israelites would have actually thought about the world. That they're, in other words, an angel is nothing more than a messenger. It's a job title. It doesn't have what's called ontology, which is a state of being. An angel is not an ontological term; it's a functional term, right? So an angel is a messenger. So what kind of being are these angels or are these demons? And the biblical answer is that these are called Elohim. So the word Elohim, Elohim, is a word that some people would be familiar with, because it's the word used for God very often throughout Scripture. But unfortunately, people often think that just is referring to capital G, God. And so when they see Elohim, they think, oh, God, like the one true God of the Bible. Well, the problem is that word Elohim is the same word that is used all over the scriptures for little g gods, whatever those are, for angelic beings, for even the dead who are pass into the afterlife, and So this term is not a term that just means, oh, capital G God. It's a term that is a locational sort of term. It's a geographical term. It's a term that denotes a where a being is from. And so an Elohim is a spiritual being. And what you quickly learn when you read like Psalm 82 in the Bible is that you've got these verses that seem to talk about God standing in the midst of other gods, and it's like, who are these people? And so it turns out, again, I'm not saying anything that's controversial outside of like super conservative Christian circles because it just sounds so weird to many people. But as far as scholarship goes, this is not not controversial in really in that sense. I mean, there's a little bit, but not much at all. Um, and the idea is that ancient cultures, including the Hebrews, had a concept of a divine council of spiritual beings. Now, not council in like not a COUNSEL, like God needs their counsel, like God is taking advice from these people, but a council, COUNCIL, I think I'm spelling that correctly, where it is a organized group of, spiritual beings that God is the head of. And just like God works through human beings to accomplish his purposes, God also works through these spiritual beings to accomplish his purposes. And what does this have to do with story, Steve? Get on with the point. Well, the problem is if you look from the very beginning of Genesis and even starting in Genesis 6 is where you really start to first see this stuff. Actually, Genesis 3, but it takes a little bit to get there. You have to understand some later stuff before you really understand what's happening in Genesis 3. It's all throughout the Bible. The storyline is something more like this. In the beginning, God creates spiritual beings and the earth and whatever. And there was a spiritual rebellion before there was a human rebellion. There was a rebellion of divine beings in the spiritual world before there was a rebellion of human beings in the physical world here. And essentially you get to this point in Genesis 6 where we only get 4 verses that hint towards a story that people living during that time period would have had a great awareness of. And basically there's a whole Babylonian and Mesopotamian context of this story that we don't really get in the Bible because it's not necessarily pertinent details to the storyline, but that they would have understood. And it basically talks about how there were fallen angels who came down to the earth and they had sex and intercourse and whatever with human females. And that is, oh, this sounds weird, Steve. Well, like, sorry, but it's true. And right. And so there was widespread corruption in the world. And by the time we get to Genesis, chapter 6 and I think it's verse 5, it's like, God's like, well, geez, I need to destroy the world because the world has become so evil, so wretched that everything that's alive, like all that's in their hearts is evil, is to do evil continually. And the idea is because these fallen angels came down, they taught the deviant arts and witchcraft and all these sorts of things to the people, to human beings. And they had these half breeds that called the Nephilim in the scriptures. And it's like, what in the world? There's all this weird stuff going on. And believe it or not, this thread carries all the way through the conquest of Joshua. When they're taking over the land of Canaan, they're kicking out the Rephaim and the Zamzumim and all the descendants of the Nephilim were there. The scriptures even say, and you remember that when the Bible says there were giants in the land, and so it's really just crazy. Like all this stuff is there, but you don't think about what it means. Well, the true story is that not only did Jesus come to redeem us from our sins, but he also is the preeminent one, the Son of the Most High. He is of all the other spiritual beings. He is the one that God has placed. And this language is all over Scripture. Just read it again with this in mind, and you will be blown away. It's all there. Like Jesus is the Son of the Most High. He is the God of the divine council. And so when Jesus came to earth, he not only defeated sin, but he also defeated the rival and hostile gods. And so that's why, I mean, again, like we live in and under the dominion of Christ. He is taking that back, and there is still evil in the world, but like he is defeating and will defeat that evil. And there's this whole added depth to it that's a part of it. So again, if you're interested in this to get a probably a better overview than what I gave you here, you can actually go to my website, my blog, steveschramm.com/DCW. And I have some introductory resources there to help you like learn more if you're interested in learning more about this. And there's some good books too. A good one to start with for introductory stuff would be Michael Heiser's book called Supernatural. Really great book that gives an introduction to this stuff you should check out. So why do I like it? It gives added depth to the biblical storyline. I love anything that gives me more context and added depth. It's like you hear these stories, Bible stories, and whatever over and over again, and it's like it feels like something's missing. And that's my next point: is that it makes so much sense when you actually start to study this and look at it and piece it all together. Makes so much sense of otherwise confusing, strange, and disconnected ideas that you see in the Bible. It's like why did God send Joshua on this conquest to like drive all these people groups out to give them a plot of land? Have you like if you're familiar with biblical stuff, like have you ever thought about that for 3 minutes? And it's like that doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. But then when you understand this part of the story, and the people groups that they were told to wipe out, it's because they were the descendants of the people groups or of these Nephilim tribes that came down all the way back Genesis 6, 1 through 4. It's all connected, you know, it's all connected. And so it's like these are little things that don't really make sense on their own, but then in the context of the divine council worldview, they do make sense. And then finally, um, is, well, just that this idea is controversial, and who doesn't love some controversy? I mean, you know, it's kind of fun to introduce this to somebody, especially who's more of a layperson for the first time and see their reaction to it and get their thoughts. And it's like, wow, it's really crazy. We really live in a much more supernatural world than we think. And this is why I'm so interested in even getting into fiction stuff or whatever, because much like C.S. Lewis was eventually convinced to become a Christian when Tolkien, you know, was able to communicate to him that Christianity is the true myth. When I look at the world in the context of the divine council worldview, that makes sense to me. And it really just it shows how much more story driven the world is even than what I thought before. So that's that.
Yeah, I'll just pretty much kind of echo what you said. You actually gave a pretty good overview of it. I thought that was really well
Good.
delivered. Yeah, that was good. Um, yeah, it's definitely not something that you bring up on Sunday school morning in a fundamental
Right.
church.
Right. No, yeah,
Or,
right.
I mean, any church,
Or
especially
in many churches at all. Yeah.
many churches at all. But it's one of those things where you and I were just talking. We were talking about just random fun stuff like aliens and like spiritual stuff and what
Yeah.
people see when they take mushrooms and just just all these weird things. And then you had mentioned that book to me, and you were telling me a little bit about it, and just right away, it just even before reading the book, it just clicked and made sense because like those few verses in the Bible where it came to, there was always something there that just didn't make sense. And then once you don't think it's a big deal, but then once you really start realizing what that all means and what the Israelites like how they viewed the world and how everything works, I mean, it just there's nothing that made more sense. I mean, it was
Yeah.
I always knew that there had to be something there, and it shouldn't surprise if you are a Christian, it shouldn't really surprise you how, I guess, odd that stuff is simply from the fact that if you do believe in the supernatural God that created the universe, that,
Yeah.
that could save sins and, will live forever with him. If you believe all that stuff, we have a supernatural God. It would makes 100% sense that we live in the supernatural world.
It does.
It just makes
It
sense.
does. And even like again, you know, this is not a Christian podcast, but you know, because I believe that the world is based on the most awesome true story that was ever told, you know, it's going to come in quite a bit. And it's like if you look at you read the Bible, and it's like how many times, by the way, it's hundreds, where the term most high is used to describe both God and Jesus. This is just one of those little things that if you're not thinking in terms of the most high of what,
You
like,
just think, "Oh, great,
it just doesn't make sense.
more
It
than that."
you read the words and it's like, "Oh, this must be just be some way of talking about it." No,
It's
it
very
just
cool.
actually means what it says. He's the most high of the other gods, that the gods, by the way, that he created. I feel like that's an important thing to say,
Fair, yeah,
is that Yahweh is an Elohim, but not all Elohim are Yahweh. God,
yeah,
we still believe, Jesus is the, God is Yahweh, the God of the Bible, the one true creator. Every other thing is separate from him. He created these beings, and they are spiritual beings to help him, just like we are human beings who help him. So that's that. And looking
that's a
forward to
good
hearing
overview.
your
We
next
definitely should
story.
have we should definitely talk about that more some other time, though. Very good.
For sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
related to stories, because there's a lot of stories digging down into there.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
so you chose a book, so I'll go with my book. I decided to so far, well, we kind of talked a little about that one together, but this one was a recent one that we watched together, and I chose Dune for my
Yes.
obviously, like, there's some other books that I like better, The Lord of the Rings, Thomas Covenant, but um one of the main reasons why I picked Dune, one is kind of fresh in our mind from seeing the movie, but also I'm kind of looking at it as the book too. My opinion, the movie was an excellent adaptation of the book. I just can't describe how well everything I pictured in the book was as it was in the movie. It was incredible. Um, that was, and I've only read the book once, so I am not an expert on Dune like I am with other stuff. So there's details that if there's a huge Dune fan listening, I probably stumble over some things, won't get everything right. But um Dune was one of those books where as I was reading it, um, I liked it more and more as it went on. Uh it stuff kind of came together. I wouldn't say I rush read it, but I read it quicker than other books, didn't really take it quite as seriously. Um but it interested me and I went through it and I finished it. And then after I got done reading it, I I could not stop thinking about it. Um it was and I think it was because of a right I think it was just so I think it was so true to form of how human beings like if that were a real setting in a real situation, that is how human beings would behave with each other. Um and I mean, even now, I'll just thinking about wow, how perfect he described, a lot of subjects about the human condition, about um, governments, religion. It just touches so many topics. I won't get into that specifics. We'll probably have a devoted episode about talking about it, but um, it's one of those books that really surprised me, and the only couple other books that gave me that feeling afterwards for such a long time of just a huge impression on me is Lord of the Rings and Thomas Covenant. And that's saying something because those have been my only 2 books forever, but when I read Dune a couple of years ago before the movie came out, it just really, really took me by surprise. Um, so yeah, one of the reasons why I really like that one is the realism with how human interaction is and how humans behave was just phenomenal. And then two, I think he had a amazing balance, even though it's considered a sci-fi movie, it's or a sci-fi book. It, I don't classify it as science fiction, and I could be wrong here, but I thought he had mentioned um, at some point in his life that he didn't want it to be a sci-fi, thing. That was his method of communicating what the story he wanted to tell. But is much more than a sci-fi book. That's one reason why I didn't read it for so long is because I'm more on the fantasy side of things. But I'm very glad that I read Dune.
Who wrote it? Do you remember his name? Is it some
I mean, I should know again. It's probably embarrassing that I don't know it. What was his name? Are you googling it?
No, but I can't.
I got it. I got it.
You got it? Yeah, cool. Um,
Right.
yeah, it was a while you're getting that, it was a
Frank Herbert. Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert, yes, yes, of course. Um, it was a fantastic, fantastic movie. I had not read the books. I literally paid $30 for the audiobook
That's right.
in the parking lot of the movie theater after I got out of the movie at, like, 1 in the morning.
Yeah, you texted me after you said bought it, $30.
Bought it. Yeah, because I was just like, "Man, if the movie was that good."
Yeah.
I was just really, really impressed by the movie, and, I maybe and you tell me, I mean, if you wanna give a little synopsis of it, you can, otherwise, maybe we'll save
Oh
that
yeah,
for
I probably
yeah, you would give a little synopsis of it, then we can go deeper, later on, but I'll just say it was a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely see it. It was awesome.
I feel like a synopsis I would not do justice simply because it's so in depth, like Lord of the Rings, as far as the
Oh, yeah.
terminology and different stuff, and I just don't know this off the top of my head. But very generally, um, again, I'm really gonna butcher this. I think it's the Achilles. I think that's the name of the family. They live on a
Atreides,
planet.
is
Atreides,
that
yeah, yep. They live on
yeah.
their own planet. Don't know the name of it. And the main character Paul is, I guess, the prince or the
Yeah.
son of the person who rules it. And how the government structure is set up is their family is moving from their planet to Dune. I forget the other name for the planet.
Arrakis.
Arrakis, yes. To I believe so. To to basically take over the farming of the spice there. And there's not getting into the whole political play of it, but basically the people that live there on the planet that are natives there, they have this physical, spiritual, and religious connection to the spice of the land. That's and they're connected to it on a deeper level than it just being a physical object that is on their planet. And Paul, I won't say anything beyond just Paul gets wrapped up in the whole spiritual and physical aspect of the spice and the people there. And it's just a beautifully told story and an amazing payoff at the end of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
That
Yeah,
that
very,
synopsis
very
did not do it justice. I need to read the books again soon before we discuss
yes.
in depth again.
It's cool. It's cool. Yeah, it is yeah, but I'm with you. It was a great story, and the movie making I thought was just fantastic on the recent film.
And
So
Hans Zimmer, shout out again.
yeah, man, that Hans. It's hard to beat Hans. So
All
for
right,
sure.
Steve, you're up.
All right, I'm up. I'm up. Cool. So this is another one that I feel like for various reasons I could go on forever, but I will try to keep it very concise. And this is kind of a two for one here in the stories of both Disney and Apple. And of course, Apple is known for its simplicity in advertising and storytelling. I mean, there's was always those jokes about the PC versus the Mac, and the PC being so complicated. And a lot of times your Apple ads were just very colorful with two words. Think different or whatever. And it's like there's just the spirit of advertising at Apple was always simple, and then just there's a movie, an old made for TV movie that you can still find, you can download it all on the internet in places. Like I think you can get it on Amazon Prime if you pay for it or whatever. But an old movie that was made called The Pirates of Silicon Valley that was tells sort of the story of the early personal computing game, with Apple and Microsoft and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and then some of even how it relates to like Xerox and IBM and some of the things that were going on there. And, so I love Apple. I love their design. I love their simplicity. I'm a huge kind of Mac and Apple, nerd. And, Steve Jobs is just one of those figures who is just so inspirational, to me. He's a dreamer. He's a visionary. I mean, my gosh, very much of the way that you interact with the world today is a result of his thinking. Um, the smartphone. Apple invented the smartphone. I mean, the thought of having music in your pocket, that was Apple. It's hard to forget that, or it's hard to, sometimes we don't think about that because it's so much a part of our world. But it wasn't Sony who made that. It wasn't Samsung who made that or whatever. Yeah, it was Apple. Apple drove that innovation. And one of the things I love about Apple specifically is that there was there's a shift that has occurred, you know, in the last 20 years. The technological development of the world that we live in is just it's through the roof. And what's really interesting is that Apple has always been about innovation, but they never got swept away with the obsession to to do more and to do better. And I guess what I'm trying to say is Whereas a lot of the big ideas Apple was responsible for, other companies came along and, tech technological people, like, your YouTube reviewers and just people who interact with tech, your computer lovers were starting to ask for more. And so, these more smartphone companies popped up, and they gave people what they wanted. They gave you the ability to sideload apps, and they gave you the ability to like change your, really customize and personalize the look and feel, or they'll be faster to a feature. They'll add touch things or facial recognition or whatever. And what's interesting is that Apple has never been quick to implement those things. They've always been slow to implement those things. But when Apple gets to it, it's arguably the best execution of the idea that there is. And so I just love that Apple takes their time, and they don't always get it right. I'm certainly not saying that. But I th I would argue that much of the time, most of the time maybe, when Apple finally executes and implements an idea, it could be that their competitors have had it available for 5 years, but when Apple comes out with it, it's the smoothest operation, it's the most secure, it's arguably the most elegant. At least that's my personal opinion and the opinion of other Apple, lovers. And so I just appreciate that about Apple. I appreciate their simplicity. I appreciate their attention to detail. I appreciate the importance of cohesion between software and hardware that they focus on. And so I think that's really special. And then just the visionary genius, in my opinion, of Steve Jobs is just something that is super inspiring to me. And I just love, like, a perfect example is some, may not know the story, but basically Steve Jobs founded the company late 70s. It grew quickly. And in 1984, 85, I think it was 85, the board kicked him out of the company. And the next 12 years, 13 years or so of the company were just riddled with failure after failure after failure. And here it is, like 1997, there's like 150 products in their product line, and they're about to have to sell. Their CEO at the time, gets ousted, and they're really doing bad. And they bring Steve back. Steve agrees to come back. By the way, in the meantime, he founded Next, another huge computer company, and a little animation studio you might have heard of called Pixar. Um, yeah,
What was
just in
that
the
name again?
meantime,
What was that name? I'm
Pixar,
not
yeah,
familiar with.
Pixar, yeah, yeah,
I'll Google it
right?
after this.
Yeah, you Google it afterward, you'll find out just a little bit about it. Right? So the dude founds Pixar while he's out of Apple and, Toy Story and all those other things.
How crazy is that one thing? They just, "Oh, I founded this while I was away."
Well, right, and that's where I say, like, we're literally talking about a man who is responsible for most of the way you interact with the world today. The animated movies that you see today, I mean, this is all this is Disney Pixar. They changed animation, and this was under his leadership and his visionary direction, right? And so that's why he's just an inspiring guy. Plus, he's a Steve, and it's just really hard to beat that.
It
Um,
just
if you're a Steve,
things.
just doing Steve things. So, yeah, so I love Steve. Okay, the other one is Walt Disney. Um, and Walt Disney, it's funny, he got fired from one of his first jobs trying to get into animation, because he lacked imagination. That's why he was fired, because he lacked imagination. Can you believe that? And I mean, my gosh, I hardly have to go into the same level of diatribe about Walt as I do about Steve, because I feel like more people know Walt's story. But there was um, whenever Disney World was finally, like Epcot was finally, uh, launched, and Magic Kingdom and all that was finally launched. The Florida project, as it was called, if you know your Disney history, um, basically Disneyland in California had been going for quite a while, and then, Walt, under various, companies and sub corporations and made up names and this, that, and the other thing, started purchasing up all this land in Florida for what they called the Florida project, which would be what we know today as Walt Disney World. And he never got to see that come to fruition. And there was a reporter who asked, and Roy Disney, who is, God, I thought it was his brother, but I heard the other day something about nephew. So I'm really confused. I don't have my Disney family relationships all sorted out. But but anyway, his name was Roy Disney. I'm pretty sure it was his brother. He was kind of like the operations guy. So Walt was the visionary, and Roy was like the operations guy. And, oh, you know what I think it was? I think it was that, his brother was Roy, and then his nephew was also named Roy. And so it was like Roy O. Disney, I think, versus just
Yep.
Roy. Anyway, whatever, who cares? And so after the opening of Walt Disney World, this reporter is interviewing, um, Roy, and he's like, "Man, isn't this awful that, like, Walt isn't here to see this?" And and Roy, he tells the reporter, he's like, "No, you've got it completely backwards. Like, this is all here because Walt saw it, and he saw it first, and now it's here." And, again, if you know your Disney history, what is there now isn't even necessarily the full picture of the idea that Walt wanted. Walt actually wanted, honestly, a prototype city of tomorrow that would be constantly known for innovation. That's what the idea for Epcot originally was. But, um, it it's still, like, just the and not only that, but while if you there's some great documentaries and things you can watch, the way that he ran the company is still very much, of course, they've had their ups and downs, but it's still very much how the company is run today in the sense of standards of excellence and really, I mean, world building is just a huge thing. I mean, when you're in Disney, the entire experience is designed. Nothing is unintentional. Colors that are in certain places are there for a reason. When you walk into different areas of the park, the smells change. The ground beneath you changes based on the different lands that you're in Magic Kingdom, and the transition areas between them are intentionally designed to be different than any of the lands, so that it's like clear where you are. And so the entire when you go to Disney, something is always happening to you, and you usually don't know it, but it's always happening to you. And, there's customer service and safety are like the highest priorities there, right? And so it's like there's no question, whatever a cast member, that's what they call their employees, whatever a cast member is doing, if you are having an issue, no matter what they were originally doing, their expectation is to stop and help you get your issue resolved, or just whatever it is, or stop and take a picture with you if your kid wants a picture. And um, okay, let me just go into my reasons here. So Steve and Walt, they're two of my favorite entrepreneurs and visionaries. That's why I picked the stories of both Apple and Disney are just wonderful. They are wonderful stories in themselves of their founding and of their vision, but as they go along, just how the different companies are run and things are really a testament to their founding. And so, yeah, these guys are just my favorite entrepreneurs ever and my favorite visionaries. And I want my little marketing business to be the Disney of marketing businesses and the Apple of marketing businesses. And that may be crazy, but hey, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's the experience that I want to give. And so, we can do that. Um, at every turn, more nuggets of wisdom can be compiled from their stories, right? Everywhere you look, there is something that you can learn. There's a lesson. I think of Apple and simplicity. One of my favorite books is called Insanely Simple. It was told by an advertising guy who worked really, really closely with Steve during his time at Apple and even at Next. And it just tells the story about how simplicity was the driving force behind Apple's success. And then finally, I think both companies are just great role models of story, like I was talking about, customer experience, world building. These are these are the kinds of things these companies are doing. Like I say, they're an experience that's happening to you more than a service or a product. There you literally you identify, you know, with a movement. You identify with something when you have an Apple computer or when you wear, your Disney stuff. And so you're identifying with something that's bigger than you or bigger than a company. And so, and it's all driven by story. Every last bit of it is driven by story. And so that's why I think it's so powerful.
Cool. I have one thing to say about Apple, one thing to say about Disney.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the thing about well, I got two things about Apple. I love my iPhone because it works and it works well. I
Right,
don't have
right.
issues. it, and I'm waiting for them to come up with a car. Um,
Mm.
that's what I'm waiting
Wouldn't that
for.
be cool?
They,
Yeah, it'd be so awesome.
yeah, looking forward. Give Tesla some competition, maybe. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'd like to see that.
That's Tesla, that's another story. Tesla, SpaceX, Elon, man, we
Well,
could talk about that
yeah,
for
that's
hours.
a great
Yeah.
one. Yeah, it's that'd be a great one. And then for Disney, I love Epcot. It's such a great place. It's just I know that there's Magic Kingdom and stuff. I went there when I was young. I don't really know much about it, but you really feel the magic at Epcot.
Oh, yeah.
It's great there. Um,
100%. Mhm. And if you're into technology and innovation and, again, stories, I mean, it's like if you've ever ridden it's the ball at Epcot, it's called Mission, what is it called? Oh, Spaceship Earth.
yep.
It's kinda like, it reminds me kind of the background of our stream, here. It kinda takes you from the very beginning.
Yep.
I have some differences in opinion from the standard story of what the beginning looked like, but anyway, right? It takes you from the beginning to where we are now. It's just really cool to see the technological development through story.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Cool.
alright, man, what's your final entry in our little series here?
Um, yeah, so I actually decided to choose a video game for the last one.
Okay,
Uh,
cool,
I had a list of a few video games, but I decided to go with one. It's called Hellblade's Senua's Sacrifice. Um,
cool.
this one, it's it's considered the company that made it. I actually forget their name right now, but they label it as a independent AAA game. AAA meaning that it's big budget, tons of people working on it, a
Yeah,
shit. And it was a studio with only like 20, 25 people. And it really is an incredible experience. So it's I'm actually gonna specifically read what it's about, and then I'll go into a little bit details on my
yeah,
own, just because they do a good job describing it. Set in the Viking Age, a broken Celtic warrior embarks on a haunting vision quest into Viking hell to fight for the soul of her dead lover.
whoa.
Um, it's so
Oh,
anyway,
yeah,
yeah. So
awesome.
the game is about a woman. Her name is Senua. Um, I it's been a while since I played it, so I forget the exact timing and setting of it. But basically, her village got destroyed, um, and she's coming back to return to it. Um, and the main theme of the game that makes it so interesting is she suffers from psychosis. I'm not an expert on psychosis and everything, but in the game she hears voices, sees things, and but because it takes place in the Viking Age, she doesn't see it as mental illness. She thinks that there's a curse on her, and so when she goes
Mhm.
back and she ends up like venturing into hell because she hears these voices and sees these like shadow creatures that you end up fighting and everything. And to her, it's all real because she thinks it's a curse on her. So she's trying to fight for the soul of her dead lover. And then along the way, you have your typical like bosses and stuff, but you meet these interesting characters that are part of her life when the whole time it's really her mental illness that's kind of playing tricks with her. So it's a really good blend of the psychosis part of it, the mental part of it, and knowing that it's kind of all fake, but at the same time, how real it is to her. And the one thing that really makes it so good, if you have a time, just like YouTube, the trailer for it or some gameplay, what it is it's uses motion capture. So the person they have playing as Senua, they get them kind of like Gollum in Lord of the Rings. I'm sure you've seen footage of him putting on the
Sure.
suit and doing essentially like that. And so they got to the point where they dress her up in the suit, put everything on the face, and no matter what facial expression she makes, they motion capture that right in the game. So they did a demonstration one time of
Wow.
her on stage walking around making movements, making facial expressions, and on a separate TV in front of the whole audience that her character was doing those exact movements in the game.
So
So
cool.
you have that realism of that is an actual person there doing that. And it was just a it took about 10 hours for me to beat it. I always play games on the hardest setting just because I feel like a boss when I end up beating it. And
Sure.
it was a wild trip. So it was one of those games that just kind of blew me away. And they're coming out with a second one soon. I forget what that one's called. Um, oh, Hellblade, Senua's Saga. But anyway, it was really fantastic
Cool.
one with the and so the story with it, so main reason why I like it is just a great story. I mean, the gameplay is fun too, but just a really great ride. So anyways, that's
Cool.
uh,
Yeah. That's really neat. Yeah, I need to get back into video games again. That was always so fun for me growing up. And anyway, yeah, it sounds like a fun one. Is 10 hours like is that
it's about
a
10 hours to beat it.
yeah, is that like a long time or is that a short game or it seems like a not a long
I've
time.
I played amazing games. God of War is another one of my favorite ones, and that took me 50 to 60 hours playing on the hardest setting to do the whole thing. I
Gotcha.
know it took me 10, and I loved them both. God of War
Yeah.
probably a little bit more, but about the same. So the hours don't really mean too much to me as long as you can deliver on a great story and
Having
great
fun
music
time.
and yeah,
That's
exactly great time.
awesome.
Yeah. I do want to throw in a bonus thing here. I didn't plan
Yeah.
on doing it, but I figured I'd want to do something nonfiction, a story. I'll make it really quick. It's a song called Kenji, and it's by
Okay.
Fort Minor. Um, Mike
Huh.
Shinoda is actually part of it, and he's from Lincoln Park.
Yeah. Yeah.
So have you heard of the song called Kenji?
I have not. I'm familiar with Fort Minor, just
It's
not that song.
gotcha. It's a true story. I'm pretty sure it's about both Mike Shinoda and another band member's parents or grandparents. I think maybe both. That were alive during World War II. They lived in
Mm.
America and they're Japanese, and it's about during World War II after Pearl Harbor that they rounded up the Japanese and put them in internment camps.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And even though they were American citizens, they got rounded up. And just a really powerful song about them coming home after the war and seeing like their apartments destroyed, vandalized, and not being welcomed back.
Man. Yeah.
Just I mean, just brings tears to your eyes. So I thought I'd just mention that as a little nonfiction as well.
That's really solid.
Really, it's
Yeah.
really powerful.
I remember Mike talking on various occasions about his Japanese American heritage. And that's something that he's really passionate about. I didn't realize that he had written a song specifically, on that theme. So it's called Kenji, K
Kenji, yeah,
K
look at it. It's
E
like a
N
2-3 minute song.
J I.
Yeah,
Okay,
Kenji. It's really good.
cool. Yeah, very good. I'll look it up. All right, man. Well, this has been so fun. Went
Yeah, definitely.
a little long, but that's cool. I
That's
mean,
fine. Yeah.
there's no rules here. Who cares? So,
People can always skip you or skip me, so
that's exactly right, and they'll probably skip me most of the time, so that is not a problem at all. Yeah, very cool to discuss some of our favorites. So, as of right now, I don't know what we're getting into next week, but I know we'll be getting into something. So definitely tune in. I'm hoping to have YouTube up and going real soon, and so maybe even by now. So hopefully you be watching this on YouTube, or you can catch us in your favorite podcast player. Definitely, whatever all the things like, rate, subscribe, share, flex your,
definitely share.
whatever.
Tell people about it.
Share. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, right? Share, tell other people about it if this is interesting to kind of hear. I've never heard anybody else talk about stories from both angles on one show. So I think we're doing something really unique and special here. And just want as many people as possible to be a part of it. And who doesn't want to hang out with your boy Al? I mean, yeah.
For the record, I didn't know that actually showed so people can see, but I'll stick to it.
It does. It's you, man, and I just need to put Shraminator in mine. That's my de facto nickname. So anyway, all right, my friend, I'm gonna close her down here. But yeah, thanks guys for listening in and being a part of this. We really appreciate any time you spend with us. So.
See ya.